podcast where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting new ground in the digital age. From genomic codes to row-out facts, we cut through the noise, no holding back. Not your daddy's dairy news tonight. We're sparking debates with every insight. The ring's not where the real fight's at. It's in the data, in the channel chat. From pasture to processor to your morning cup, we're raising the stakes. Try and get ahead of herd. Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd. Come on! The bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome to the Bullvine Podcast, the bold voice challenging conventional wisdom in the global dairy industry. I'm your host, bringing you cutting-edge insights that connect the dots between dairy science, economics, and innovation from around the world. At the Bullvine, we don't shy away from controversial topics or uncomfortable truths. We tackle the issues that matter most to progressive dairy professionals who demand more than surface-level analysis. Whether you're managing a 50-cow operation or a 5,000-head facility, our mission is to arm you with evidence-based perspectives that can transform your business. Today's episode dives deep into research and insights that could reshape how you think about your operation. So grab your coffee, settle in, and prepare to challenge some assumptions. This is the Bullvine Podcast, where bold meets practical in the dairy industry.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here again, taking the info you send our way, articles, research, you name it, and really getting into it, unpacking what matters.
Exactly. Helping you get the key takeaways without wading through pages and pages.
Saves you some time, hopefully, and we really appreciate you trusting us with this stuff.
We do. And today's topic, well, it's one that really hits close to home for pretty much everyone listening, I'd imagine. Anyone in dairy.
Absolutely. So for this deep dive, we are tackling something that's, well, it's more than just comfort, isn't it? It's a serious threat to farm viability. Heat stress, specifically heat stress on dairy farms. We've got this really insightful article right here on the Bullvine, actually. It digs into some pretty expensive research, and honestly, it paints a stark picture. A bit alarming, maybe.
Yeah, it definitely goes beyond just saying, heat makes cows uncomfortable. This research puts some genuinely staggering numbers behind the problem. And maybe more importantly, it reveals this growing divide within the industry, a gap that's potentially devastating, something everyone really needs to grasp. Producers, processors, everyone.
Totally agree. So for you listening, maybe you're dealing with a tough summer right now, or, planning for the ones coming up. Our mission here is simple. We're going to unpack the key findings from this Bullvine article.
Get right into it.
Yeah. We'll get into the science. Why is heat such a big deal for dairy cows? Then the economics, which are serious and unequal, and how it's hitting farms of different sizes so differently. It's not just about welfare, important as that is. It's about the whole structure, the future of dairy farming.
And the real strength of this research, the stuff cited in the article, is the sheer scale of it. It uses this massive data set.
Huge.
Right. It puts numbers to what so many producers have seen anecdotally for years. But it proves pretty clearly that the pain isn't spread evenly. Not at all. It creates real winners and losers in this warming climate we're in.
It really does. And it highlights some things that might surprise you, like how early cows can start feeling heat stress maybe way before you even notice it yourself.
Yeah.
Or the massive differences in heat tolerance between breeds that alone can change everything for a farm's bottom line. And just the scale of the financial hit the industry's already taken and, well, what's projected.
It's becoming really clear, isn't it? Heat stress isn't just some summer annoyance anymore. It's a fundamental challenge, right to the core of dairy production.
Okay, then. Let's unpack this. So let's jump right in the numbers. Because the figures highlighted in this Bullvine article coming from that big University of Illinois study, they really set the stage. They're staggering.
No kidding.
They point to a cumulative loss, get this, of $245 million. Just from heat stress. And that's over only 5 years, 2012 to 2016.
$250 million. Just poof, gone from the industry's pocketbook in just 5 years. And you got to understand where this number comes from, right?
Yeah, the methodology is key.
Totally. The University of Illinois researchers, they didn't just, call up a few farms. They analyzed over 56 million individual production records. 56 million.
Wow.
Yeah. From 18,000 different dairy farms across 9 states in the Midwest. So this isn't just guesswork or like anecdotal stuff. It's big data, giving us a really solid data-driven view of the hit from heat.
And the physical loss behind that money is just as, well, mind-boggling. The article translates that $245 million into lost milk, about 1.4 billion pounds of milk over those 5 years.
1.4 billion pounds.
Yeah, and the article uses this great analogy to help picture it. That's enough milk to fill over 160 million gallon jugs.
Okay, that's a lot of jugs.
Right, and if you line them all up end to end, they'd circle the Earth 1.5 times.
Oh.
It's just a powerful way to visualize the sheer volume of milk, the revenue that just didn't make it into the tank purely because of heat stress.
And the science behind why that happens, it's pretty direct. Professor Marin Skidmore explains it in the article. He points out, a high-producing Holstein. She's basically a milk factory, right?
Absolutely.
And she generates a ton of metabolic body heat doing that, roughly the equivalent of running 5 standard space heaters, nonstop.
5 space heaters inside a cow.
Exactly. Now, unlike us, cows, they don't really sweat effectively. Their main ways to cool down, like panting, just become less efficient when the temperature and, crucially, the humidity climb.
That humidity factor is key.
It is. So this internal heat builds up, and that triggers a whole cascade of negative things mentioned in the article. Their breathing rate shoots up, heart rate too, they get restless, and maybe the biggest hit for production, their appetite drops.
And obviously, if a cow isn't eating enough,
She can't make milk efficiently. Simple as that.
Professor Skidmore points out, right, that whole physiological response, less feed intake, energy just going up, trying to stay cool, it directly leads to less milk. It's not just about them feeling bad, it's a direct hit on the farmer's wallet.
Precisely. And the article then takes these huge industry numbers and kind of zooms in, brings it down to the individual farm. And that's where we first see this uneven impact. For small farms, and the study found that as under 100 cows, the data showed they lost, on average, 1.6% of their annual yield, just from heat.
1.6%. Now, that might not sound like a disaster on the surface, but the article makes it really clear what that means in practice, especially for a small farm, likely running on tight margins already.
Right. It's not just a number.
No, it's like operating your entire farm, feeding, milking, all the work, but getting zero income for almost 6 whole days out of the year. Just because the cows got too hot, that's revenue just vanished, hitting their already thin bottom line hard.
And that financial pain, that loss, as this big study shows really clearly, it is not being felt the same way across the board. Which brings us right into, well, why some farms feel the heat so much more than others.
Okay, so maybe you're starting to feel a bit warm as the temperature creeps up, right? But the research in this bovine article, it suggests your cows are probably feeling the heat stress way, way sooner than you are.
Much sooner, yeah.
And it's often not just about the number on the thermometer, humidity. That plays a massive role, which is where this Temperature-Humidity Index, the THI, comes in. It's the key metric everyone uses for cattle.
Yeah, the THI is so critical because it's not just temperature. It really captures the perceived temperature for the cow.
Yeah.
How much stress is actually on her cooling system. It combines the air temp and the relative humidity.
And the article says heat stress can start affecting cows at temps as low as, 19 Celsius? Like 67 Fahrenheit?
Around there.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if the humidity is up. That's a temperature where, we might feel totally fine. Maybe even cool.
So why does humidity matter so much for a cow? It's about how they cool off, right?
Exactly. Unlike us, we sweat a lot, right? That evaporation cools us down. Cows, they don't really sweat effectively. They produce a little moisture, sure, but it's limited. Their main tools are panting, breathing faster, getting rid of heat that way.
Okay.
But if the air is already full of moisture, high humidity, then the moisture they produce, or the warm, moist air they breathe out, just can't evaporate properly. Evaporation is how cooling happens physically. So high humidity basically shuts down their main cooling system, traps the heat inside.
Gotcha. Dr. Joseph McFadden at Cornell explains that pretty well in the piece.
He does. He notes that cattle start feeling stress way lower than we do because, 1, they produce so much internal heat just making milk, and 2, they have this limited ability to get rid of it through sweating. So their internal temp starts rising, stress kicks in, often way before a farmer even notices obvious signs, like heavy panting. It's happening inside first.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting. Something maybe not everyone thinks about enough. This Boldvine article digs into the huge differences in heat tolerance by breed.
Ah, yes. Genetic.
Yeah, it's genetic. The research shows it makes a massive difference. Different breeds just have different THI thresholds for when heat stress starts messing with their bodies and, their milk production.
And that fundamental genetic difference,
Right.
That's exactly why, like the article says, you could have two farms right next door.
Yeah.
Same weather, same temperature, same humidity, same THI.
Right.
But see totally different impacts on milk production in their herds. It could just be the breeds they have. The research actually includes a really useful table showing these differences.
Let's look at that table because it's pretty revealing. The Holstein Friesian, right? The classic black and white dominant breed everywhere.
A workhorse.
Totally. They start feeling significant stress at a THI of just 68. 68.
That's pretty low.
Yeah. And the hit to production. At a THI of 80, they can typically lose 20 to 30% of their milk. That's a fifth, almost a third of their potential milk gone on a hot, humid day.
Okay, now compare that to, say, the Jersey.
Yeah.
Much higher tolerance. They don't typically feel stress until the THI hits 75.
75 versus 68, that's
Yeah.
a big jump.
It's a huge difference on the THI scale before that stress response even starts. And even when it does get hot, like THI 80, their production drop is generally lower than Holstein's, more like 10 to 15%.
The table also mentions others, like the Kiwi Cross, often used in grazing setups. They start feeling it around THI 69, lose maybe 15-25% at THI 80.
And brown Swiss are in there too. Stress starts around THI 73 with a 12-18% drop at THI 80.
So this data coming from places like Dairy NZ and, studies in the Journal of Dairy Science,
Yeah.
It makes it crystal clear. Breed genetics are a massive factor in heat vulnerability.
Absolutely. Like the article spells out, your Holstein herd is feeling the pressure at THI 68. That's a level where your neighbor's Jersey herd might still be cruising along relatively fine. That difference alone explains a lot of farm level variation.
So, okay, the natural question then is, if Jerseys or Brown Swiss handle heat so much better, should farmers facing really bad regular heat just switch breeds? Is it that simple?
Well, according to Dr. Chad Detzow at Penn State, who's quoted in the article, it's definitely not a simple switch. Not at all.
Bigger.
He calls breed adaptation, thinking about changing breeds, a long-term strategy that involves complex trade-offs. It's a big decision, takes years.
Right. And the biggest trade-off, the one everyone thinks of first, is probably volume, right? Which Dr. Detzow mentioned.
Exactly. Breeds like Jerseys, Brown Swiss, they've got that better heat tolerance we just talked about. But the article notes they usually produce less total milk volume than a high-producing Holstein herd, even when conditions are good.
So if you're paid mainly on pounds of milk, switching could mean selling way less milk overall, even if the cows are happier in the heat.
But, and this is but the article adds some really important nuance. Jerseys and Brown Swiss, they often have higher components, higher fat, higher protein percentages.
So quality over quantity, potentially.
Potentially. And maybe even more important, the research cited suggests they actually show better feed efficiency, specifically under heat stress, compared to Holsteins.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's not just about sheer fluid volume. It's about what that milk is worth, component-wise, especially if your co-op pays that way, and how well the cow turns feed into product when she's stressed. A Jersey might give less, but the milk might be worth more per hundredweight, and she might keep converting feed better when it's hot.
The article also talks about a kind of middle ground, crossbreeding.
Right, the hybrid approach.
Yeah, it mentions this big University of Florida study found that if you strategically cross Holsteins with Jersey or Brown Swiss genetics, the offspring can get some of that better heat tolerance.
From the Jersey or Brown Swiss side.
Exactly, while still keeping around 90% of the Holstein's high milk production capability.
That makes sense. You get that heterosis, right? Hybrid vigor. The crossbreds are often just more robust, handle stress better than either purebred parent.
And Dr. Leslie Berger adds another really critical point in the article about crossbreeds.
Oh yeah, fertility.
Yes. She says crossbreeds often show better fertility, specifically during hot weather, and that is huge. Because heat stress often tanks reproduction, missed heats, low conception, losing pregnancies early, way before you even see a drop in the milk tank readings.
Good point. By the time the milk drops, the repro damage might be done. So better fertility in crossbreeds under heat. That means getting cows bred back more reliably, which is critical for cash flow.
So the article really wraps it up well. Deciding on breeds or crossbreeding. It's complex. Depends entirely on your farm, your goals, how you get paid volume or components, and what challenges you already face, especially with getting cows bred in the summer.
It's definitely a long-term strategic thing. No easy answer fits everyone. But understanding these breed differences absolutely essential for knowing your farm's baseline vulnerability to heat.
And that difference in vulnerability combined with other factors.
Huh?
Well, it leads us to maybe the most troubling finding in this whole bovine article.
Yeah, this is where it gets really stark.
It is. This is where the research shifts from just counting losses to talking about the potential, structural changes to the whole dairy landscape. And the article pulls no punches. It uses some really strong language, talking about how this unequal heat stress impact could lead to a climate-driven extinction event for small dairy farms.
Extinction event. That's wow. But unfortunately, the numbers from that University of Illinois study, they seem to back up that level of concern.
They really do. The research is clear. Heat stress is not hitting all farms the same way across the Midwest. Those small farms, the ones under 100 cows in the study, their production losses average 1.6% annually from heat.
Which, remember, was significantly higher than the overall industry average loss in the same study, which was 1%.
Right. So let's really break down what that gap means. Small farms, collectively, they produce less than 20% of the total milk in that huge data set, right?
Less than a fifth of the volume.
But they carry a much bigger piece of the financial damage from heat. The article says they account for a full 27% of that total $245 million loss.
Okay, wait. So they produce less than 20% of the milk, but absorb over 27% of the heat losses.
Exactly. They lose more milk per cow than the bigger farms. And when you add up those higher individual losses across all the small farms in the study, it accounts for over a quarter of the entire region's financial hit from heat, even though they're smaller individually.
And the article explains why that happens. It often boils down to infrastructure, resources.
Yeah. Dr. Jennifer Van Oss from UW-Madison points out that a lot of small dairies operate in older facilities. Barns built decades ago, not designed with modern cooling in mind, maybe no cooling at all.
Right. Built for a different climate, essentially.
Pretty much. And she calls it a compounding problem, like a negative feedback loop.
How so?
Well, their cows suffer more because there's no cooling. Production drops further because they're suffering. And crucially, these farms often have the fewest financial resources to actually buy the cooling systems or make the upgrades that could break that cycle.
It's a vicious cycle then. Suffer more, produce less, have less money to fix it, so you suffer more next time.
Exactly. The article quotes sources pretty bluntly, saying, what we're seeing is nothing short of a climate-driven extinction event for these smaller operations. It argues that while bigger farms, maybe with better margins, more capital access, they might be able to swallow a 1% annual loss. It hurts, sure, but they can maybe manage it.
But the small guys.
The small guys, operating on what the article calls razor-thin margins, they just can't sustain a 1.6% hit to their income year after year. The article implies pretty strongly that without help or big changes, many will just have to close the doors, become another statistic.
Which leads right into the biggest reason for that gap in impact that the article points to. Access to capital, money.
Right. It's not really a secret why bigger farms, often corporate structures, seem less panicked about the heat's economic hit. The article lays it out. Large operations just have access to way more capital.
I can borrow more, invest more.
Exactly, which lets them spend millions, literally millions, on fancy cooling tech and infrastructure that many small family farms just can't even dream of affording, even if they know they need it.
You see it in the examples the article gives for big farms, right? State-of-the-art tunnel ventilation systems, moving huge amounts of air, extensive sprinkler networks, fans everywhere, over free stalls, holding areas.
They even mentioned trying strategic calving schedules, shifting peak lactation away from summer, though Professor Skidmore notes that's tricky and has other risks.
But the point is, these are massive investments, millions of dollars, and they do dramatically improve cow comfort and cut production losses.
Now, contrast that with your typical small family farm, often working in barns that are decades old, maybe passed down, trying to fight hotter temperatures with whatever they can scrape together.
A few fans here, maybe opening up the sides?
Yeah, basic stuff helps a bit, sure. Open barn sides, a few portable fans, maybe raking up a garden hose sprinkler. But putting in the kind of comprehensive barn-wide cooling systems that really make a difference in a heat wave, that takes serious upfront cash, money that frankly, most small farms just don't have lying around.
And the article makes a good point. Regardless of, the bigger debates about climate change, small farmers are living the reality right now on their farms every hot summer.
Which leads to that really pointed question the article throws out there, aimed maybe at consumers, policymakers, the whole industry. Is the cheap milk in your refrigerator worth the cost of losing America's small dairy farms?
Oof. Yeah.
It highlights that these economic pressures, the need for climate adaptation, they're directly impacting the traditional structure of dairy, potentially wiping out smaller players.
It's a heavy thought. But the good news, thankfully, is the article doesn't just leave it there, all doom and gloom.
No, it shifts. It emphasizes that not all effective cooling solutions need a massive corporate budget.
Right. Extension folks, like those at Penn State quoted in the article, they point out there are affordable options, things specifically suited for smaller operations on tighter budgets.
Dr. Cassandra Tucker at UC Davis is quoted talking about shade. Just shade.
Simple but effective.
Yeah. She says even just strategically placed shade can cut the heat load on cows by up to 50%. 50. And that alone can lower a cow's core temp by 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. Simple shade cloth, well-placed trees. It makes a real difference, especially for cows on pasture or waiting and holding areas.
And the article gives us really useful breakdown of options, right? Based on cost, effectiveness, and even potential return per cow, citing research from places like Florida and Cornell.
Let's look at the lower cost ones first, because those are key for smaller farms. Strategic shade, like cloth or simple structures, estimated at just $1 to $3 per square foot for materials, offers that big drop in solar heat load, and the estimated annual return per cow, $56 to $112.
Now, you've got portable fans, maybe $300 to $1,200 each, depends on the fan. Put them in the right spots, holding areas over feed bunks. They can knock the THI down 3 or 4 points right there. Estimated annual return, $84 to $168 per cow.
And simple, low-pressure sprinkler systems, maybe $1,000 to $5,000 total, depending on the size needed. You combine those with fans, get that evaporative cooling going right on the cow's hide, can drop body temp by about 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the return, $112 to $224 per cow annually.
Now, the article does mention the pricier options, too, for comparison. High-pressure misting systems, maybe $5,000 to $15,000 or more. Very effective, higher estimated return, $168, $336 per cow. But, more complex, more cost, more maintenance, too. Those nozzles can clog.
Right.
But the really critical takeaway here is that even those lower-cost options, shade, fans, basic sprinklers, they provide real, documented returns on investment. Multiple universities have shown it. Doing something, even if it's not a cat-like system, makes a measurable financial difference.
And here's the rub. Even with those proven returns, those solutions, even the cheaper ones, we circle back to that tough economic reality for small farms.
Yeah, the upfront cost.
Exactly. $100 or $200 per cow return sounds great long-term. But finding that initial, say, $5,000 for a basic sprinkler system, that can still be a huge hurdle if cash flow is tight.
Absolutely. And the USDA ERS data in the article, it paints that picture really clearly. Small dairies, under 100 cows, they run on incredibly thin net margins. The data shows average margins of just $60 to $175 per cow per year.
60 to 175 profit per cow for the whole year.
Yeah. Now compare that to the big guys, over 1,000 cows. Their margins, $275 to $425 per cow per year.
Wow, that's hundreds of dollars difference per cow.
Huge difference in financial cushion, right? Which leads to what the article called that cruel paradox.
Right. The farms most vulnerable to heat stress, the ones feeling the pain the worst when production drops.
They're also the ones with the least money, the lowest margins, the tightest cash flow. They have the hardest time affording the very solutions that could help them survive and make more money.
Dr. Mark Stevenson from Wisconsin illustrates it perfectly in the article, that $5,000 basic cooling system we talked about. For a small 50-cow dairy, making maybe $125 profit per cow, that $5,000 investment is almost their entire profit for the year. 125 by 50 cows equals $6,250 annual profit.
Wow. Basically wipes out their whole year's game.
Right. But that same $5,000 system on a big 5,000 cow operation, based on their higher margins, it's less than a week's profit for them.
Okay, yeah. That puts it in stark relief.
So for that small farmer, deciding to spend $5,000 on cooling, it's not just, another line item in the budget. Dr. Stevenson calls it an existential decision. It might mean taking on debt, spending almost all their scarce annual income just to get started. It's a risk many just can't afford to take.
And that is precisely why access to financial help, to assistance programs, is so absolutely critical, to bridge that capital gap for small farms. The article highlights a couple of key ways.
Like EQIP.
Exactly. The USDA's Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, that's a big one. It provides cost sharing for on-farm improvements, including cooling systems, if they're part of approved conservation practices.
And Paul Wolf from the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition is quoted specifically saying EQIP can cover up to 75% of the costs, 75%, for qualified cooling upgrades that also offer environmental benefits, like saving energy or improving air quality.
That 75% cost share changes the whole equation, doesn't it? Turns that maybe impossible $5,000 investment into a much more doable $1,250 out of pocket for the farmer.
Huge difference. The article also mentions some dairy co-ops are stepping up too.
Yeah, recognizing the gap. Some have started group purchasing programs, letting their smaller members buy cooling gear fans, sprinklers at lower costs because the co-op buys in bulk. Makes it more accessible.
And even with that tough upfront cost, the article keeps coming back to that powerful ROI, the return on investment.
Because the research backs it up.
Yeah. Quoting Dr. Albert DeVries at Florida again, the return on investment for even basic cooling should not be underestimated. His research shows, pretty consistently, for every dollar a small farm spends on effective heat relief, they can expect $2.50 to $5 back.
$2.50 to $5 back for every dollar spent. That's a great investment.
It is. And crucially, the returns aren't just from keeping milk production up during hot spells, it's also from better cow health, fewer heat-related sicknesses, better reproduction getting cows bred back faster, keeping body condition on them. It pays off in multiple ways, and potentially pretty quickly, if they can get over that initial capital hurdle with things like EQIP or co-op help.
And the article gives us a fantastic real-world example of all this coming together, a boots-on-the-ground story.
Yeah, the story of John Werning, farmer in Iowa, 65 cow dairy.
His story is just incredibly powerful and probably very relatable for a lot of folks listening. Back in 2022, really brutal summer heat, he was losing almost 20% of his milk production. 20%.
He describes it vividly, quoted in the article, "I was watching my livelihood evaporate in real time. Milk prices were tight, barely covering feed. He knew, straight up, another summer like that, he'd be done. Foreclosure. Another farm auction statistic," as he put it.
So facing that, what did he do? Did he just throw in the towel?
No way. The article details his plan. He got proactive, didn't give up. First, crucial step. Reached out, worked closely with his local extension agent.
Smart move. Use those resources.
Definitely. And based on their advice, he put together this staged approach to cooling, designed specifically for his tight budget, focused on the biggest bang for the buck first.
So, not a whole barn overhaul right away.
Nope. Targeted, affordable steps. The article lists them. Portable fans, strategically placed in holding areas, $1,800. Added shade cloth extensions over key pasture spots and feed bunks, $2,400. And put in a simple low-pressure sprinkler system just for the barnyard holding area, combined with the fans, $3,200.
Okay, so what's the total for those first steps?
Comes out to $7,400, which, still isn't pocket change for a 65-cow dairy.
Right.
And here's where the assistance part is key, showing the power of these programs. John got about $4,800 in cost-sharing funds through EQIP.
So EQIP covered more than half.
Yeah. As he says in the article, the EQIP help made the investment possible. Without that grant, that $7,400 might have just been too much to swing on his margins.
Okay, so he gets the systems in. What happened? What were the results?
Dramatic, transformative. The very first summer after putting that stuff in, his summer production losses plummeted from that catastrophic 20% down to just 7%.
Wow. From 20 down to 7. That's huge.
Huge. The article estimates that difference translated to roughly $22,000 in extra milk revenue for him that summer compared to the year before.
$22,000 on a $7,400 investment minus the EQIP share.
Right. He's quoted making this really powerful statement about the ROI. He says the systems he installed have paid for themselves twice in a single season, just from the recovered milk, not even counting maybe better health or repro down the line.
Incredible.
But maybe the most telling quote from him in the whole piece, the one that sums up the stakes. Without these changes, aided by EQIP, I'd been another farm auction statistic by now.
Chills. That story.
Right.
It's not just an anecdote, right? It perfectly illustrates the research findings on ROI. And it shows the absolutely critical difference that accessible funding like EQIP can make. It literally turned a farm-facing collapse into one that's surviving, more resilient, maybe even more profitable, despite the heat challenges.
But it's not just about individual farms and these, inspiring success stories, important as they are.
Right. The article looks bigger picture, too.
Yeah. The bovine article makes it clear. If the current climate trends keep going the way they are, that summer production slump across the whole industry, it's only going to get worse. This isn't a problem you solve once and forget. It's growing, accelerating.
And the research kind of explains why that acceleration is likely. Right now, most of the total milk loss happens on what they call low and moderate heat stress days. Days where the THI is up, but not necessarily off the charts extreme. But there are lots of those days.
Okay.
However, the article points out there's really extreme heat days, super high THI. They cause more than double the milk loss per cow compared to the moderate days.
More than double the loss per cow on extreme days.
Right. So as climate change is expected to make those extreme events more frequent, more intense, those per cow losses are going to shoot up dramatically, leading to much bigger overall losses for the industry.
The article sets some regional data, too, from NCBI research published in 2022, shows the impact is already pretty big, widespread across the U.S. northern and central regions. Saw about a 7.12% total drop in summer milk production. Southern regions, understandably, a bit higher, around 7.94% drop.
But check out August specifically. The article really highlights August, dairy farms down south, losing over 10% of their potential milk production in August alone because of heat stress.
10% in 1 month.
Yeah, that's a massive direct hit to the bottom line in a key month. And like the article keeps saying, small farms on those razor-thin margins, they just can't keep absorbing that kind of hit year after year. It's just not sustainable financially.
Dr. Jeffrey Dahl, another leading heat stress researcher from Florida, he's quoted warning that heat stress, it's basically become a year-round management concern now.
Not just summer anymore.
Not just July and August. He says even for farms up north, the way these critical heat events are becoming more frequent, more intense, and maybe happening outside the traditional summer window. Producers need to be ready for heat stress potentially from late spring clear through early fall now.
And this bigger system-wide challenge,
Yeah.
it brings us to that maybe uncomfortable question the article raises about the dairy industry's structure itself.
Yeah, the processor part.
Right. While dairy processors are reportedly making pretty good profits, maybe especially when supply gets tight, which heat waves hitting small producers can cause, the article asks, have they adjusted their pricing models at all to account for the fact that small farmers are facing these huge, disproportionate, and growing costs?
The economist for the American Farm Bureau, he's quoted saying it pretty plainly in the article. The pricing structure of the dairy industry does not currently account for the uneven burden of climate adaptation.
Doesn't account for it. Wow, that's a strong statement.
It is, and the implication is clear, isn't it? It suggests small producers are footing the bill for climate adaptation, buying coolers, losing milk costs that, from this viewpoint, maybe should be spread more fairly through the whole supply chain, processors, maybe even consumers.
So this failure of the current market pricing to really value, I guess, climate resilience or the diverse network that small farms provide, it leads to that final big, maybe most urgent question the article poses for the future.
Which is?
Does the market really value keeping this diverse structure? Lots of different sized farms. Or is it, maybe unintentionally, through pricing that hurts small guys and makes adaptation too expensive for them? Is it silently accepting, maybe even speeding up, the trend towards total corporate consolidation? Fewer, bigger farms.
It's a critical question, really gets to the heart of what dairy farming will look like in the U.S. down the road. But while those huge market and policy questions are being debated...
Which could take a while.
Yeah. Thankfully, the article pivots back to concrete, actionable things individual farmers can do now on their own farms, which is where the immediate focus has to be for a lot of people.
And before it lists those actions, it gives that handy little assessment tool, right? So you, listening, can get a quick feel for your own farm's risk level.
Yeah.
Based on the factors the research showed matter most.
Yeah, it's a simple 5-factor check. You score your farm on each one. Low risk is 1 point, medium is 2 points, high is 3 points. Add them up. Higher score means higher vulnerability, basically.
Okay, let's run through the 5 factors quickly. Factor 1, primary breed.
Right. Jersey or brown Swiss dominant, that's low risk, 1 point. Mixed breed herd, medium risk, 2 points. Mostly Holsteins. High risk, 3 points because of that lower heat tolerance.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Factor 2, cooling infrastructure.
Oh.
Got comprehensive systems like tunnel ventilation, extensive misting. Low risk, 1 point. Just basic fans, some shade. Medium risk, 2 points. Limited or pretty much no cooling. High risk, 3 points.
Factor 3, regional location. Where are you farming? Northern states, generally lower risk, 1 point. Central states, medium risk, 2 points. Southern states, high risk, 3 points, just based on baseline climate.
Factor 4, herd's average production level. Herd averaging under 20,000 pounds SCO year. Low risk, 1 point. Between 20K and 25K. Medium risk, 2 points. Over 25,000 pounds average. High risk, 3 points.
And the reason for that, again, is those eye producers just generate way more internal body heat making all that milk.
Exactly. More heat to get rid of. Okay, and factor 5, primary housing type. Open pasture with plenty of shade. Low risk, 1 point. Cows have space, airflow. Freestall barn with some ventilation. Medium risk, 2 points. Confinement housing, limited airflow. High risk, 3 points. Heat can really build up there.
So you add up your points across those 5. The article gives a simple guide. Total score of 5 to 7. Lower vulnerability, probably focus on targeted fixes. Score 8 to 11. Moderate vulnerability, need a more comprehensive approach. Score 12 to 15. High vulnerability, need urgent action. Be aggressive. Your farm's at significant risk.
And the article's clear. The higher your score, the more urgently it suggests you start implementing the solutions it lays out to protect your cows and protect your business.
And importantly, it doesn't just diagnose the problem and give you a score. It gives concrete steps, actionable things you can do today, right now, even before the next heat wave hits, proven strategies.
Let's walk through those 5 critical actions the article recommends every dairy farmer think about. Number 1, conduct a comprehensive heat vulnerability assessment.
Right. Don't just stop with that quick 5-factor score. That's just a starting point. The article specifically flags the USDA Climate Hub's free heat stress audit tool. It's online, www.climatehubs.usda.gov.
And that free tool, the article explains, it helps you do a deeper dive, looks at your specific farm layout, your buildings, your herd details, local climate data. The goal is to pinpoint your exact weak spots and then help you prioritize what to fix first, based on your budget, where you'll get the most impact.
Good resource. Okay, action number 2. Implement low-cost shade solutions immediately.
Immediately. Don't underestimate shade. The article hammers this home. Even temporary shade cloth, strung up in the right places, can cut heat load by 30 to 50%.
Wow.
Yeah. And folks like extension specialists at University of Kentucky are quoted saying, prioritize shade over holding areas and feed bunks first. Places cows bunch up, spend a lot of time, especially when it's hot.
And the article advises, call your state's cooperative extension office. They offer free advice on where to put shade on your specific farm for the best effect. Materials, angles, location, they can help tailor it.
Smart. Okay, action number 3. This one's crucial for getting help paying for bigger things. Apply for EQIP funding this week.
This week, urgency matters. Because getting government funding like EQIP approved, it takes time. Months, often. You need to start the process before you desperately need the system.
Don't wait for the crisis.
Exactly. And remember, EQIP can cover up to 75% of the cost for eligible cooling systems if they meet the conservation standards.
So how do you start?
The article says, visit your local NRCS service center. That's the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They run EQIP, or just call the main USDA conservation line. 888-526-3227. Ask for help with the application. Don't let the paperwork stop you. That funding could be the key.
Good advice. Action number 4, join forces with neighboring producers.
Yeah, think about forming or joining local equipment sharing cooperatives. It's a way to tackle that capital barrier together. Pool resources.
And there's research backing this up too.
Yep. Dr. Katie Proudfoot at Ohio State, her research cited in the article found small farms that shared portable cooling gear. Big fans, temporary misters. They cut their individual upfront costs for access to that equipment by up to 60%.
60%. So you get the benefit during heat waves without having to buy and maintain the whole thing yourself. Makes sense.
Totally. Okay, and finally, action number 5. Adjust your production strategy. This has a couple of parts. Long term, maybe it's considering breed changes or crossbreeding like we discussed. But short term, it can be simple, no cost schedule changes.
Right. Dr. Larry Tranel, dairy specialist at Iowa State Extension, he's quoted saying, simple tweaks, milking times, feeding times. When you handle a cows can cut production losses by 10 to 15% during heat events with zero equipment costs.
Zero cost, 10-15% savings. That's huge.
Yeah. Like the article mentions, just shifting high-energy stuff like feeding or milking to cooler times, evening or early morning, instead of the hottest part of the afternoon. Makes a difference. Common sense, but needs conscious effort.
So the overall message from this Bullvine article feels pretty clear, right? Yes, the big picture climate and market challenges are real and daunting, but you don't have to just sit and wait for some industry-wide fix.
You can take action now on your own farm.
Exactly. Taking these steps, especially focusing on those affordable, high ROI options and tapping into funding like EQIP can make a critical difference right now, helping you weather the storm this summer and the ones to come.
And the article gives one last nudge for getting more help. Call your state dairy extension specialist. They know your local conditions. They're free. Or check the National Dairy Farm Program website, nationaldairyfarm.com. More resources there, too. Don't go it alone.
Absolutely. Your farm's survival, your future profitability, especially if you're running a smaller operation, it could really depend on taking action before the next heat wave hits hard.
So wrapping up this deep dive into the Bullvine article on heat stress, quite a journey, huh?
It really was. We started with just the sheer scale of the problem, those massive losses, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of pounds of milk, all backed by that huge University of Illinois study.
Then we got into the science, the why dairy cows struggle so much, that critical temperature-humidity index, their trouble sweating, and those really significant differences in heat tolerance between breeds. Holsteins versus Jerseys, big difference.
Then we hit that tough part, the stark research showing how small farms are getting hit hardest. That capital divide stopping them from getting cooling, leading to that really strong language about a potential climate-driven extinction event.
But then, the pivot to solutions. Affordable cooling options, shade, fans, sprinklers, all with proven high ROI. And the crucial pathways to funding, like EQIP covering up to 75%, and co-op efforts making things accessible.
We shared that powerful story to John Werning in Iowa, showed how a smart, budget-conscious plan combined with EQIP, it didn't just save his farm, it made it more resilient. Real-world proof it can be done.
And finally, we looked at the bigger trends, worsening impacts from extreme heat, the uneven burden across regions, and those tough questions the article raises about market pricing. Is the system fair? Does it account for these adaptation costs? Or is it pushing towards consolidation?
The key takeaways from this Bullvine piece feel really essential. Small farms are losing disproportionately. 1.6%, 1%, carrying 27% of damages with 20% output. Breed matters hugely. Holstein THI 68 versus Jersey 75. Cooling, even basic stuff, pays back big time, $2.55 per $1 spent. EQIP is vital, covering up to 75% makes it feasible. And the current market price doesn't reflect this uneven burden, which raises huge questions about the industry's future shape.
That phrase, climate extinction event, for small farms, it really frames the stakes, doesn't it? Especially with projections saying heat stress impacts could jump 30% or more by 2050.
Which leads us to that final thought to leave you with. Given everything this research highlights market failures, the capital gap, the unequal costs, what changes need to happen beyond the farm gate? In policy, in the supply chain, maybe even in how we all think about the true cost of food. What's needed to keep diverse dairy farming viable in a warming world? Is the system we have now sustainable for everyone?
It's a huge question. Goes way beyond just managing cows better. It requires some real industry soul-searching, maybe policy action. But as this Bullvine article shows really well, understanding the facts, the science, the economics, it's always the first essential step towards making or advocating for those needed changes.
Couldn't agree more. Well, a huge thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope unpacking this Bullvine article on heat stress has given you some valuable insights, maybe a tool to check your own risk, and definitely some concrete ideas you can act on.
Yeah, and please do check out those resources mentioned in the article. Your extension agent, the USDA tools, the farm program.
Yeah.
They're there to help.
Absolutely, use them. Okay, until our next deep dive.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Bullvine Podcast. If this analysis challenged your thinking or sparked new ideas for your operation, we've done our job. Remember, the dairy industry's future belongs to those willing to question conventional wisdom and embrace evidence-based innovation. Don't just adapt to change, lead it. For more cutting-edge dairy insights, visit us at www.thebullvine.com. Subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive content that doesn't make it to the podcast, and join the conversation on social media where we continue these important discussions. If today's episode delivered value for your operation, share it with a fellow dairy professional who needs to hear this perspective. The industry advances when we all advance together. This has been the Bullvine Podcast, your source for bold, evidence-backed dairy industry insights. Until next time, keep questioning, keep innovating, and keep leading the future of dairy.